In this first video, I'm going to explain how we get from a HTML page like this to a rendered page like this. And the main thing I'm going to discuss in this video is React and functional programming and React. The way I always lay out programs is I encode everything in the URL. So my visualization is encoded in the URL, and that then drops down into the application where it goes and collects some data, and then that drops down through a number of functions that draw the different bits on the screen. And if I want to change the visualization, so switch the overlay off to none, I can do it by clicking on this button, and all this button does is change the URL. And if I go back to the previous URL, we've got terrorism, I can go forward, I can go back, I can type in the word none, and it sets this all up. And again we go map, and go back, and I can then take one of these URLs, cut and paste them, drop them in an email, and somebody else can see the same visualization as myself. So, first question is, how do we get from this plain old HTML page, which is the source of this, to this visualization? First thing I do is I use a project called Create React App, and this will set up all the things I need in order to create the app and take this piece of code, mix it in with all my code, lots of different third-party libraries, and produce a piece of HTML, CSS, JavaScript that generates what we see on screen. One of the very, very important things I do when I'm building an app is I quite often think about how somebody's going to maintain this app. And here we have a piece of visualization, and for the poor person who has to maintain my app if I move on, how on earth can they work out how this is created from this? And if we just take this and we go into a full-blown browser, I'll just open this up, and how did this piece of code appear on screen? One of the things I do is, if we actually inspect that, we can see there's something called country overview. So if you find a class name that has been capitalized like this, if we take country overview and take that and we go into our app and we do Control P, Control V, we can see there's a country overview component. So I always make sure, and I'll just show this component quickly before we dive in, this component that I build always has a class name that is the same as the file name, so that we can very quickly work out which piece of code built which piece of UI. And very, very important golden rule: every time I create a piece of code, a component, it's always wrapped in a div with class name equal country overview. I'll go a bit more into detail of why I don't like React fragments. This method produces an awful lot more divisions. However, I find that this doesn't slow down the computer, and it makes it much easier for people to read the code and work out what's going on. And I find that's much more important than writing terse, very compact code. And there's going to be lots of examples as we go through on how to write code that is easily readable by other people. Lots of us can write code that is readable by a computer. However, it's much more difficult to write code that can be read by other people. So let's go back to our globe and let's work out how we get from here to here. The first thing is this is our complete HTML page, and what happens is React will take this and it will insert all of the code we write merged in with all of the React code and all the other third-party libraries and drop it in this div. And it does that by running a JavaScript file called index.js. It's just the way React is set up. And here's index.js. It's built with the modern style, so we import other libraries just like we would with C# or Python, and then it renders. There's a function here to say render this inside of this element, and that's what kicks off the React process. But if you're coming from jQuery or another language, hold on, we're mixing HTML and JavaScript. How does this work? Well, this actually isn't a JavaScript file, it's a JSX file that is interpreted by the React system, and every time you see this funky green stuff, what's actually happening here is React is replacing this with a function that creates this particular piece of HTML or custom elements. So just remember, every time you see a piece of green, so for example like app here, it's running a function that fills that in. So if we do Control-C-P-B, again, name everything, it's one file name, one component name, name them the same. Here's our app, and it's a function. So we import lots of things, set some stuff up, design ourselves a function, and export it. And then React will take that function, fire it off, and it knows about all the other functions inside here, and it will fire all of those off to build a big tree of items that create this visualization we have over here.